Knowledge is power, but power without purpose is nothing. Even those endowed with the power to reshape all of existence can achieve nothing if they do not know what they wish to change. Knowledge is the only good, and the only evil is ignorance. Ahriman, the chief librarian of the Thousand Sons, Archmage of the Corvidae, the overcoming sun, the greatest sorcerer of the Legion, banished from it and doomed to wander the Eye of Terror and beyond in search of knowledge. Wielding a black staff and endowed with knowledge that only the highest demons could contest, he possesses terrifying power. By the will of Ahriman, armies of lesser sorcerers, animated by the Warp Rubrica, and countless slaves of darkness wage war across time and space. Myriads of souls have been the price of a thirst for forbidden knowledge that has driven Ahriman from the early days of the Legion's curse. Ahriman was the first and only chief librarian of the Thousand Sons, and the most gifted among all the powerful psychers. Born on Terra in the lands of the ancient Achaemenid Empire, he and his twin brother were among the first recruits into the 15th Legion. Possessing significant psychic power and a deep intellect, he rose in the darkest days of the Legion, and after reuniting with Primarch, became the best disciple of Magnus the Red and his main assistant. The Lord of Seers and Warriors Mystics of the Corvidae cult, he was also a skilled fighter and a resolute field commander, hardened by nearly 2 centuries of wars. In battle, Ahriman often played the role of a key link of his legion, predicting the enemy's actions and devising complex strategies to pave the way to victory, even amidst the surrounding disarray and chaos. But of all Ahriman's strong points, his best trait was his unwavering will, not just to survive but to win at any cost. It is this trait that would compel him to embark on a strange and terrible path long after the fall of Prospero. Ahriman and his brother Ormuzd, born Terrans, raised among the tribes of the Achaemenid Empire, whose kings had allied with the Emperor of Mankind during the Unification Wars. "Were you there?" asked Lemuel. "Did you see it all?" "No, but I was a capable student. I was fortunate to be born among the tribes of the prosperous Achaemenid Empire. Our kings had been allies of the new ruler of Terra for 100 years, and thus we were spared the horrors of nuclear war and the invasion of the Storm and Lightning Warriors." Ahriman and his brother were chosen to join the ranks of the Astartes. The biological heritage of my people was not corrupted by inherited diseases and viral infections so often found among other Terran tribes. And then, one day, the Emperor appeared in our lands with an entire army of scientists, who conducted tests on each family group for the necessary dominant genes. The sought-after genes were found in me and my brother, and with our parents' blessings, we were taken to a secret laboratory located deep beneath the crown of the world. Before parting, our mother gave each of us a talisman, and said that they contained the power of Zulkarnain, the greatest ruler of the Achaemenid. She asked us to keep the talismans safe, saying that the power of the ancient chieftain would aid us. Ahriman pulled at the leather cord hanging around his neck, revealing a silver pendant the size of a coin, a precise replica of an oak leaf that adorned his armor. Of course, it's foolish superstition. How can a king, turned to dust thousands of years ago, help the living? But throughout the period of training and exercises, we kept the talismans, in defiance of the new imperial creed that glorified logic. And what sort of training was this? Trials of strength, speed, and mental abilities. In our people, truth has always been valued above all else. Furthermore, Ormuzd and I came from the royal bloodline, so from childhood we were accustomed to competitions, hunting, and debates. We excelled in all areas of study, and our biological enhancement pleased the scientists who observed us. There were many like us in this mountain camp, but gradually divisions into different groups occurred, and Ormuzd and I were glad to remain together, whereas many other twins were separated during the training. In the course of their education, the brothers' latent abilities surfaced. Ahriman could foresee events before they happened, while Ormuzd mastered the ability to control lightning. But soon, the Legion began to change. Their hidden curse activated a genetic defect, the flesh change. Ormuzd and I were always in the vanguard of the Thousand Sons. In battles as well as in our unusual pursuits, we thought we were immune to the flesh change, that we were too strong for this ailment, such arrogance. Ormuzd was the first to fall victim to this misfortune, and as he fought against his rebellious flesh, I was forced to ensure his safety. It was at this moment that the forces of the Great Crusade reached Prospero, and the Emperor found Magnus, but unfortunately it was already too late for Ormuzd. Then I remember hearing a calming voice in my mind. This was how I imagined a father would speak to his ailing son. I fell into darkness, and when I awoke I saw that my body had not changed at all. The flesh change had nearly destroyed our legion, but that day we regained control over our bodies. The legion was saved, but I felt no particular joy because a part of me died that day. "Your twin brother," Lemuel said softly. "Yes, I was healthy, but Ormuzd died. His body was too badly damaged by the flesh change, and there was no chance of saving him," said Ahriman. "I took his talisman and inserted it into my armor. I had to perpetuate the memory of my brother." The death of Ormuzd left an unhealable wound in Arzek's soul. Under the guidance of Magnus the Red, Arzek reached the limits of knowledge and psychic abilities, quickly rising to the position of chief librarian of the Corvide sect and becoming captain of the first company of the 15th Legion. Being one of the 1,000 Sons meant not just becoming a warrior of the Emperor, but also a sage, an erudite, an adept of transcendent knowledge. Others fought in the name of the Emperor with bolt guns and blades, while the 1,000 Sons summoned lightning from the skies, incinerated enemy armies with typhoons of sorcerous fire, and toppled the walls of citadels with the force of their minds. Conquering new planets, they gathered knowledge, built great libraries, and comprehended the wisdom of lost worlds. However, having ascended to the pinnacles of knowledge, the Sons were doomed to fall. The yearning of Magnus for occult knowledge caught the attention of other Primarchs, who remembered the dark shadow that Psychus had cast upon humanity during the Age of Strife. Condemned by the Emperor, the Sons were forbidden to use the arts they had long mastered. But the 1,000 Sons could not resist the power of the warp, and violated the edict. Then the Space Wolves descended upon Prospero. Amidst the burning ruins of crystal cities, on shores piled with corpses and seas reddened with blood, the Sons turned to the warp, and the warp heeded their call. It is said that the skies of Prospero turned to flame, the waters to acid, and the cries of demons spread among the shattered pyramids. A psychic storm erupted, tearing the surviving Sons from existence, and through time and space transported them to the world within the Eye of Terror, the planet of the sorcerers. Reality in the Eye of Terror is bizarre and insane. In its eerie expanses, the laws of physics bow to the whims of the warp. Dreams and thoughts alter matter, demons roam at will, and time flows as if it were streams in a storm-tossed sea. In this realm of possibilities and nightmares, the 1,000 Sons found refuge. Unbound by the chains of reality and the laws of mortals, their sorcerous powers became even more terrifying, but the warriors began to change. The flesh change once again started to torment the remnants of the Legion. Mutations enveloped the Sons of Prospero. Flesh and armor fused together, and the faces of once noble sorcerers transformed into unspeakable horrors. Witnessing the degeneration of his battle brothers, Ahriman could not allow the Legion to fall even lower, and secretly assembled a cabal of the most powerful sorcerers. Some came only because they saw no other choice. Others believed in him with all their heart, and yet others were driven by despair, for time was short, but all shared Ahriman's hope that together they could save the 1,000 Sons. One of the few who opposed the rubric was Amun, who deemed Ahriman's plan too dangerous and unpredictable. He intended to tell Magnus about it. Ahriman could not allow the secret of the rubric to be revealed, so he had no choice but to kill the former mentor of his Primarch. When the preparations were complete, Ahriman, having studied the Book of Magnus, crafted the rubric, a spell that would reverse all the flesh changes of the 1,000 Sons and protect them from future mutations. Finally, having completed their great work, the Cabal unleashed the rubric. Demons howled and laughed on the towers of the planet of the sorcerers, as streams of multicolored lightning struck down from the skies. Darkness turned to light, and light to darkness. The rubric touched the warriors of the 1,000 Sons, and in that very instant, each was renewed. The mutations that tormented the Legion disappeared, vanished in sorcerous flame, but what remained was not what the Cabal had expected. Those with feeble psychic powers or entirely devoid of them became spirits, trapped within armor inscribed with runes. Within these shells, fragments of their souls howled and wailed with ghostly voices. Thus, the Rubricae were born. Those who possessed great power survived, and their might increased manifold. Observing the aftermath of his attempt to save the Legion, Ahriman realized he had simultaneously succeeded beyond measure and suffered a terrible failure. As the echoes of the rubric faded, Magnus the Red emerged from his tower to confront Ahriman and his Cabal. Bursting into the tower where the Coven gathered, all Cabal members immediately kneeled, submissively greeting the Primarch's fury. Only Ahriman remained standing. It is said that Ahriman expressed satisfaction with the outcome, and only the intervention of other forces stalled the enraged Magnus. The truth cannot be discerned in a realm of lies, but the outcome of that confrontation is known. Ahriman and all sorcerers who supported him were exiled from the planet of the sorcerers forever. In the Eye of Terror, the life of a soul can last either a heartbeat or an eternity. In this realm of paradoxes, loyalty and truth vanish amidst the screams of embodied fallacies. Wandering among the stars of the Eye is a path to glory or eternal doom in chaos. Here, legions perished and were reborn, great lords became slaves, and mortals were elevated to the grace of the dark gods of chaos. In this realm roamed Ahriman, cut off from the brothers he sought to save, doomed to exist on the brink of sanity. It is said that during these times the sorcerer lived through 9,000 mortal lifetimes, tricked demons into revealing truths, and got lost on the paths of visions. No one knows how many centuries Ahriman wandered the Eye of Terror after the exile, as time becomes fragile and mutable in the grip of the war. Regardless, Ahriman rose from the ashes of the rubric and the disgrace of exile with renewed purpose. Knowledge and understanding had always been the flame within Ahriman's soul and remained so. The rubric was a failure, but its goal was noble. If not for imperfect knowledge, what else could have been the cause of failure? With pure understanding and perfect knowledge, he could complete the salvation of the Legion. Across thousands of worlds, Ahriman sought the keys to save what he had destroyed, and his destruction mania made his name a curse on the lips of both humans and aliens. Fragments of knowledge, mysterious and blasphemous artifacts, pure spirits, all these attract Ahriman like a corpse to crows. To the Eldari, he is a scavenger reaper, consuming the souls of their dying race for secrets. To the Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, he is akin to a lightning rod, summoning hellish storms. And to the servants of chaos, the sorcerer represents a flame of power and cunning that can enlighten or incinerate the unwary. Ahriman, a master of subtle manipulations, has created cults on hundreds of worlds and bent the desires of great men to his schemes. He is the puppeteer, pulling the invisible strings of plots and intrigues that span the galaxy. When subtle means bear no fruit, the sorcerer goes to war, bringing armies to their knees with terrible visions, crushing war machines with unseen force, and tearing the souls from great heroes. Ahriman has learned the true names of demons 9 times over 9 times 9, and has struck deals to assemble armies at his call. By the will of the sorcerer, worlds burned, billions were consumed by the ravenous warp, and his fury made reality itself bleed. Among the countless atrocities, there are true examples of Ahriman's cunning, power, and ruthlessness. Once, Calliope was a world of lost knowledge, a planet wholly dedicated to the collection of records about the Imperium from its early days to the grim present. In the deep caverns beneath Calliope's crust lay piles of ancient parchments from pole to pole orbit, were encircled by data-gathering stations, and cities sprawled around the vaults of the Index. For the sake of the archives, all inhabitants of Calliope existed, from hunters destroying parasites in the depths of the libraries to scribes attempting to organize hundreds of conflicting records, all submitted to the ecology of the archives. It had been so since time immemorial, and it seemed it would be forever. But something changed. Among the cast of indexers, a faction arose calling for the unification of all indexes into an endlessly lasting formula. They called themselves the Aggregate. No one knew where the idea first came from, but once rooted it blossomed like a flower illuminated by the sun. The power of the Aggregate grew with every generation until its authority over Calliope was undisputed. Centuries passed, and billions toiled for a common purpose. Finally, they succeeded. On the day of the Emperor's ascension in the High Hall of Indexes, the bard wrote the last line of symbols, completing the formula, and at that moment, Calliope fell silent. When, a decade later, the emissaries of the Imperium arrived on the planet, they discovered a handful of emaciated people huddled among desiccated corpses. None of the survivors could remember anything longer than a few seconds, and even more strangely, all the great archives had disappeared. All the data vaults were empty, every page of parchment whitened. The only testament to the algorithm which sowed and after millennia reaped Ahriman was a single image left in the desolate minds of the people, a figure wrapped in flames in a horned helmet, stepping out of a rift in the air. For reasons known only to him, Ahriman had long sought the skull of Lepidus, a deceased hero of the Second Black Crusade. Covered in silver and engraved with 10,000 words of abhorrence, the skull was kept in the polar temple city of Dianaxis. When an attempt to acquire the skull through cunning failed, Ahriman resorted to more direct methods. Since the end of the Purge, in the shadows of the Eye of Terror, countless billions had fought and died, and for over 8 millennia, the remains of the revered dead had been kept on Dianaxis. The World Mausoleum received everything: heaps of charred bones, incorrupt bodies of martyrs, and polished skulls of space marines. Between the temple cities of the planet stretched plains of bones that grew with each passing year, and the cities themselves were built from the skulls and bones of the greatest heroes. Dianaxis was such a sacred and revered place that warriors from a dozen space marine chapters became the honor guard of the bastions on its surface. The path to its orbit was blocked by star fortresses, and millions of warriors stood guard over the skulls of those who had sacrificed themselves to hold back the darkness. In the far reaches of space, Ahriman burned planets and sent screeching souls into the warp, and the dead worlds converged, forming a sorcerous symbol with Dianaxis at its heart. When the stars reached the correct alignment, the sun of the mausoleum world was ripped from reality, leaving a gaping wound. Blood and fire fell from the skies. The skulls of the dead wailed, reliving their last moments while the towers of the ossuaries were engulfed in rainbow flames. Demons poured out of the hole in reality and fell upon the mausoleum like shooting stars. The defenders cried out as the children of chaos clawed at their souls. Amidst the slaughter appeared Ahriman, surrounded by lightning, accompanied by sorcerers and rubricae. The powerful mages advanced into battle, slaying the defenders and burning demons with fire. The honor guards stood in their way, but a disdainful gesture left nothing but ashes and silent screams. And then from the sanctuary emerged Firebane, the last warlord-class titan of the Legio Officium. The roar of war horns echoed across the cursed world, and its weapons carved a path to Ahriman's circle. Using the power of other sorcerers, Azek brought the god machine to its knees, then tore the core of the plasma reactor from its chassis. As Ahriman held the skull of Lepidus, a battle of demons and men raged around him. Raising it to his eyes, he found the word he had hoped to see. Then Ahriman tossed the skull aside and vanished with his warriors, leaving the world of bones to the screams of the dying and the wails of demons. In dimensions beyond the Eye of Terror, 10 millennia have passed, but Ahriman still walks the path of exile towards a distant promise of salvation. Perhaps he has already tried to correct past mistakes and failed, but as the light of the Imperium fades, each step brings the sorcerer closer to the answers he has long sought. Glimmers of secrets, lost long before humanity gazed upon the stars, flicker on the horizon in the elusive Black Library, luring Ahriman further and further down the road to the future. Flame lights this road, and the sorcerer's path is laid with the bones of the dead and the ashes of dead worlds. None, perhaps except for Tzeentch, who watches everything and laughs at fate, knows what awaits Ahriman at the end of the path, but if he reaches it, the universe will shudder. Since the day of his exile, Ahriman has wandered the galaxy in search of forbidden truths. To some extent, the great sorcerer was glad to leave his terrible past behind. Over the millennia, Ahriman sought out magical knowledge, stole ancient grimoires, talented psychers, and magical artifacts from hundreds of museums and private collections. For 6,000 years, he searched for the Athenaeum of Callimachus, after which he laid siege upon the great library, and having acquired the knowledge it contained, razed it to the ground. Ahriman encouraged the use of sorcery across dozens of worlds, many of which now revere him as a god of fire, carrying or breaking the ancient tenets of truth. He even actively traversed the shining extents of the webway, leading a grand army of 1,000 suns against Komorrah and the Eldari of the craft world. Though his own collection of talismans, psi weapons, amulets and grimoires now rivals that of Magnus, Ahriman is driven by a constant thirst to acquire even more. Recently, Ahriman has focused all his might on discovering the mythical Black Library of the Eldari, intending to claim its legendary tomes and become the sole possessor of knowledge about chaos. Before the beginning of the 13th Black Crusade, Ahriman was summoned to the planet of the sorcerers by Magnus himself, who once again agreed to act together with Ahrzek towards a common goal. During the subsequent siege of the Fenris system, they fought side by side against the despised Space Wolves. In pursuit of the Black Library during the 13th Black Crusade, Ahrzek led his 1,000 sons on a campaign to the world of Arcadian to plunder its richest libraries. However, thanks to the joint efforts of the Blood Ravens and the Harlequins, he failed. Ahriman's second plan, to use the captured Inquisitor Bronislaw Chevak, also did not succeed. The Inquisitor, together with the Harlequins, expelled Ahrzek from the webway and sealed the passage behind him. Soon, Ahrzek entered into conflict with the Inari, who were in search of Calathas. During the battle, Ahriman managed to expel the ruling triumvirate, Ivrain, Visarch and Incarn, beyond the bounds of the webway. Facing oblivion, Ivrain demonstrated to Ahrzek the ability to reverse the rubric spell and bring several golems back to life. She offered the knowledge to return his lost brothers in exchange for her life. Ahriman agreed and moved the trio back into the webway, but Ivrain deceived him. All the resurrected space marines were thrown by her into the void of space. After seeing Ivrain's abilities, which freed his brothers from the influence of the rubric, following the formation of the Great Rift, Ahriman began to gather his forces. Now, his goal is the city of the Dark Eldari, the great and terrifying Komorrah, where he hopes to find the knowledge he seeks. We all must hope that betrayal can be forgiven. The death of Ormuzd torments Ahriman throughout his existence. Even the creation of the rubric, which could have saved the 1,000 suns from their eternal curse of flesh rebirth upon arrival on the planet of the sorcerers, appeared to be Ahrzek's tribute to his brother's memory. Before the fall of the Legion to Chaos, Ahriman's life was dedicated to his Primarch, his studies, and the fulfillment of his calling, to be a loyal servant of the Emperor and his Primarch. As is known, Ahrzek established friendly relations with his mortal disciple, Lemuel Gaumon, and also realized that Apophis and Phocis Takar were his true and loyal friends. Alas, he understood this only after their demise. Ahriman highly valued his friendship with rune priest Othira Weirdmake, and was glad of the chance to share his knowledge with and learn much from the son of Fenris. The betrayal by the Space Wolf at the Council of Nicaea deeply wounded Ahriman. After the Legion's fall into chaos, the casting of the rubric spell, and the exile from the planet of the sorcerers, the once proud son of Magnus became a broken creature. Joining the gang Torment, he took the new name Hawkos, attempting to flee from his past. The 1,000 Suns, once known for their unity, begin a free-for-all war within their legion, where betrayal for the sake of power became the norm and commonplace, but all were unified in their hatred towards Ahriman. Ahriman himself declared a hunt on him. However, they were unable to harm Ahriman in any way. The rubric closely binds the whole legion with Ahrzek, who can merely with a thought turn any of his former brothers, both rubricae and sorcerers, to dust. After personally annihilating Amon, Ahriman finds himself again and prepares for a new confrontation with fate. Unlike Khan, Lucius and Typhus, Tzeentch does not consider himself a faithful and devoted follower of the Chaos Gods, and even refuses to acknowledge that he is a servant of Tzeentch. Instead, he dreams of becoming a god himself. However, the Changer of Ways, the most contradictory of the Chaos Gods, considers Ahriman his greatest champion. Somehow, by rebelling against his fate, Tzeentch embodies the very idea of Tzeentch about hope, ambition, and the thirst for change. Ahriman's main dream is to reach the Black Library. His main goal is to reverse the rubric spell and to restore Prospero. And as long as he lives, his hope for a better future for his legion and rectifying all the evil he has brought into this world also lives.